Now, mining boss Clive Palmer has foreshadowed a legal challenge to the carbon price. He told 7:30 last night the legal advice he has is that the legislation is unconstitutional. The opposition, though, is fighting the tax on political, not legal grounds. The Coalition's environment spokesman Greg Hunt joins us now. He's speaking to our political editor, Lyndel Curtis.
Greg Hunt, welcome to ABC News 24.
Good morning, Lyndel.
Clive Palmer says he's going to challenge the carbon price legislation. He says the advice he has is that it's not constitutional. In all the time the Coalition has looked at it and looked at the legislation, have you ever heard any suggestion that it's not constitutional?
Well, I won't speculate on the outcome of a court case which is now pending. What I will say is that in the court of public opinion, Julia Gillard broke the law of honesty. So Mr Palmer is perfectly entitled, as is any Australian citizen, to move a case, but once a case is now pending, I don't think it's appropriate to speculate on the outcome.
But a case hasn't been launched. Surely if there were real questions about its constitutionality, you would have heard of them by now.
Well, our job and our responsibility is to fight this in the court of public opinion, and the reason is simple. The law will be a question for the courts, but the democratic mandate is a question for the Parliament and the public.
But the Parliament's also full of lawyers, some of whom you accept legal advice from, particularly George Brandis, who we heard from earlier. If there were questions about its constitutionality, you would have expected that someone would have raised them with you, wouldn't you?
Well, I will respectfully leave that for the High Court if this is potentially going before the High Court. But I can say very simply and very plainly, in the court of public opinion, the Prime Minister broke the law of honesty. She had a duty to be honest with the Australian people before the election, a duty to seek a mandate. She did the alternative, and that's why we are taking our case to the people, and they can be the jury.
There's a report today that a clause in Westfield's leases gives it the right to pass on any costs from the carbon tax. That's just how business is done, isn't it? If costs go up, then owners of things like shopping malls will pass them on to the leaseholders.
Well, I actually have a copy of the carbon clause here. That report is correct, and it is exactly what is going to happen right around Australia. Every shop in every shopping centre right around the country will be the ones that bear the carbon cost.
But you don't know how much it is.
Well, none of them know. That's the problem.
So it might not be a big cost. It might be a cost that they can wear.
Well, let's start with the known facts. The government says a 10% rise in electricity prices. The New South Wales Treasury says a 15% rise because of the carbon tax. And the people who actually issue the bills, the Electricity Supply Association and their members, say a 20% rise. But unfortunately for small business, they don't know what their real bills will be. But every hairdresser, every cafe, every hardware store is going to wear the costs. And what that does is it puts the lie to the Prime Minister's claim that it's some mythical group of big companies, of 500 major companies that will wear the cost. It's not. It's every small business, every hairdresser, every hardware store and every cafe that will pay the price. And that means ultimately it's mums and dads and pensioners at the shop front that will pay the carbon tax.
Surely then those businesses could put pressure on organisations like Westfield to make things like air conditioning or their electricity more efficient, more carbon neutral, and then lessen the costs.
Well, let me just unpack that. If you're a hairdresser, what are you actually going to do? You're going to use the hand fan to dry somebody's hair. You're going to have somebody blowing into the coffee with a straw to get the frothing up. The reality is you use electricity in small business, whether it is the coffee shop, whether it's the hairdresser.
But ultimately it's the source of the electricity, isn't it?
Well, it's very simple that the best case scenario, according to the government, is a 10% rise in electricity charges. The more likely scenario, according to the people who actually issue the bills, is a 20% rise. This carbon tax is not a Robin Hood tax, it's a hairdresser's tax.
Those small businesses could get the benefit of a company tax cut. Some of those small businesses could get the benefit of a company tax cut coming from the mining tax, which the government has proposed, and the Greens say they will support, or not the tax cuts for medium to big businesses. You're not supporting any of it. Isn't it the right time for small business to get a tax cut? at the same time as the carbon price comes
Well, this
in.
is the worst possible time to whack a massive electricity price rise on small businesses. Our view is that both the carbon tax and the mining tax operate to Australia's disadvantage, and nor do they help global emissions. It simply transfers production from Australia to China or India or Indonesia.
But a small business tax cut could help small business.
Well, we
couldn't it?
will have a small business tax cut. What the government has is a tax hike on the one hand and some form of redress on the other. At the end of the day, it's not the top 500 companies, it's the small business owners who get hit.
You've criticised the government for closing down the solar hot water rebate scheme. You want it restarted. Isn't the way the government closed down the scheme the best way to do it if you don't want a blowout in the costs when you announce an end date for the scheme?
No, it's not. What actually happened, just to help the viewers, is that at 4:59 on the 28th of February, the government notified the solar sector that the rebate was terminating in 1 minute. That's not good management practice. We've met people that have had inventories that had been preparing for this to run until October or November. I've been on the shop floor with ream workers in Rydalmere, in the Parramatta area of Sydney, in Welshpool, in Perth. Their jobs are on the line because their firms haven't been able to plan for something that they expected would occur in October or November. If you give your word, you've got to stick by your word. If businesses rely upon government announcements to do what government wants, government then can't pull the rug out from under their feet. That's just bad faith and bad management and bad practice, as well as a bad environmental policy.
And you want the rebate reinstated?
We do. We moved yesterday in the Parliament to bring on the debate on our solar hot water rebate protection bill immediately. The government and the Greens voted against it. The Greens went to the shop floor in Rydalmere in Western Sydney only a week ago and said that they would stand up for the solar hot water rebate bill. This is their chance to show sincerity, not to be engaged in politics, and the government and the Greens should both support reinstating the hot water rebate for solar.
One final unrelated issue. Warren Entsch, the chief opposition whip, is proposing to move legislation to allow for civil unions after the private members' bills on same-sex marriage are dealt with and he believes will be lost. Would you support a bill to allow civil unions?
Look, personally, I think that is a reasonable middle course here. I have said that previously. I think that is a reasonable step. It protects the historic institution of marriage, but it provides legal equality. I'm not opposed to that at all, and I've previously said that I think that would be a reasonable step which protects marriage but provides legal equality.
And more likely to succeed in this Parliament?
I think it's far more likely to succeed, and my guess is that by the end of the year there's a very real chance that we may have civil unions as a step in the law.
Greg Hunt, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And back to you, Joe.
Thank you, Lyndel Curtis. So it was Lyndel Curtis in Canberra, and shortly